Hello, everyone. I'm sitting here with Rick Griffin once again. Mr. Griffin, thank you again for coming on to the show. I think this is the third time now.
Yeah, it's the third time. The first time with audio.
Right, yeah. So, you just recently came out with Housepets Volume 3. Housepets can be real ladies. And this is also your third consecutive win for the Ursa Major Award, so congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Uh, I was following your progress for the production of this volume on Twitter, and you actually finished this relatively quickly. Are these volumes usually finished that fast?
It doesn't really take me that long to put together one of the volumes, so long as I actually sit down and do it, because I started it about a month and a half before I finished it, but most of that month and a half was me doing other completely different things.
Oh,
Well, the
okay.
work was at the beginning of that time and at the end of that time.
Oh, okay, I got you. And during this time, well, as I was reading through the volume, I noticed that there were some extra sketches in there. Were these some of the things that you were working on in that time?
Yeah, that's what I do with the books is well, I arranged them. I have a bunch of comics that are double or triple the number of panels, and I try not to break them up. I had to do that once in the second book when I had a printing error, so I had to break one up so that I could fit the missing strip into onto one of the pages. But most of the time, since I don't break up the double, triple strips, I have a bunch of gaps strewn throughout the book. So I just put some art in there.
Okay, gotcha. And that makes sense. I don't blame you for that. And and because of this, I think we do get some pretty neat images. Like there was this two-page strip spread of this snowball fight between some of the characters, which I thought was really cute to see.
Uh,
And I also noticed that there were two pages in the book where you do a sort of continuation of the joke of these ridiculous outfits that Pete would make King wear.
yeah,
I do have a question about one of the pieces, though. Would one of them happen to be the Bane mask?
sort of.
Okay, it's just that, like, there was this small black mask that looked almost exactly the same like the one Bane wears in The Dark Knight Rises. I was just curious.
I'm trying to figure. I wish I had the book right next to me. Hold on, let me get a copy. Let me get my proof copy.
All right.
Okay, it's either that or it's some kind of Hannibal Lecter muzzle.
Okay, yeah, it does look more like a Hannibal Lecter muzzle. My mistake.
I just realized that I should have put a straight jacket somewhere in here.
You should have, yeah. That would have been interesting to see.
I don't think that actually works with the paper at all because King has his arms stretched
Oh,
out.
yeah, good point.
So if it was a straight jacket, it would just be an unbuckled straight jacket, and that's not as fun.
Uh, not really. So for this volume, it starts off with this sort of lecture that Spot Superdog gives about comics. Did you intentionally begin year 3 of House Pets with this comic, or was it just an accident?
No, I mark whenever I begin an end of year just because the comics will say end of year one, end of year two, end of year three as their titles.
Okay.
So this just followed right after the end of year two.
All right.
And it was when I first wrote it, I thought, you know what, this would actually look pretty nice with the when I actually get around to publishing these, because it starts out with an introduction to comics.
Right, yeah, exactly. And I just find it really interesting that it starts with this arc because at the end of it, there's a joke about the differences between webcomics and printed comics, in that with webcomics, there's infinite canvas, but it makes it impossible to anthologize. And and in the volume, it's just like a whole bunch of white space for that
Yeah.
page. I just found it really interesting that you decided to do it that way.
Well, I was thinking when I originally did it, I was thinking because I made this before I printed any of my comics,
Mm.
and at the time I was thinking when I was going to print it, they would only be 3 strips tall, so that when I printed this one, the bottom panel of the end of this comic would be cut off about halfway down the strip. But having a complete huge wasted white space also worked for that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was funny in the web version, but in the print version, it just really nailed that joke home. So I really got to give you kudos for that whole opening joke arc.
Thank you.
Uh, for some of the arcs or even the one-off comic strips, do you usually base them off personal experience or your own opinions and beliefs?
Well, it really depends. Flipping to the next page, the first tiger strip is a reversal of a joke that I saw in a Garfield comic once.
Mm.
And that's the entire nature of that joke. Is you basically have to know the I woke up eating my dreaming I had was eating a marshmallow. I woke up I was eating my pillow.
Wow. Well, it's nice to know where you get your inspiration from. That's are there any others comic strips like Garfield that you get your inspiration from when you do house pets?
Um, House Pets is mostly like a combination of thinking about Garfield, Calvin and Hobbes, and Bloom County.
I've never heard of Balloon County before.
You haven't?
I've heard of Garfield and Calvin and Hobbes, of course, but never Balloon County. What's
Bloom
that comic?
County is the one with Opus the Penguin.
Never heard of it.
Well, you should, because
Yeah, I know. I feel
that was
terrible
like
for
one
not
of the
knowing.
quintessential political comics of the 80s besides Doonesbury.
I'm
But it was a lot more character driven than Doonesbury was.
I'm really gonna have to check that out now. All right, so uh, when you do spot Superdog comics in general, I tend to notice that they seem to be a sort of commentary on mainstream comics, like with superheroes and things like that.
Yeah.
Are the underlying concepts that you write about in these side comics, do they stem from your own beliefs about the comic industry?
In part. I don't actually read a lot of mainstream comics. Uh, I occasionally get anthologies, but I only buy anthologies of comics if they're actually really good and, more importantly, complete stories that are standalone. If it's like a serial, then it's been going on for way too long. Like my thing that the reason that I don't actually buy and read mainstream comics is because they sort of expect that if you're going to pick up Batman, you know Batman as well as DC Comics knows Batman.
And that whole universe lore information, and like you have to know everything about it.
Yeah, and you have to know everything about it. But the thing is, you can't get the entire thing anthologized. You have to pick up bits and pieces and put it together in order to understand some of the stories that are happening. And for other stories that are happening, you only need to sort of kind of know what Batman is. And there's not really any connection between them.
This this brings to mind a specific Spot Superdog arc you did where at the beginning Peanut had wrote something to the effect of, "Oh, you don't know what's going on? Then you should have read these specific comics." Is that where you're going with that argument?
Yes,
Okay, I got you.
because there's been plenty of one of the review shows I watch a lot is Atop of the Fourth Wall.
Oh yeah, I know that show. Yeah.
It pretty much can encapsulate the problem with these sorts of cross uh, crossover continuity issues because you have when Linkara was doing the Amazon's attack review, he had in his hands the entire trade of it, but in between every issue, it had to summarize all the stuff that happened in other comics that didn't make it into the paperback, to the hardcover version, despite the fact that they expected the hardcover version to sell. It was not a complete story. It wasn't even half of a story.
Yeah, and I can imagine how that can be very frustrating for the readers who are very devoted to this series. Would you happen to watch movie Bob on The Escapist?
No, I don't watch Escapist.
Okay. It's just that he recently did a review about essentially this thing you just talked about, where uh, there was someone asked, a very well-renowned comic critic, I think, and he said that people shouldn't really be so I can't find the right word, but people be so ingrained to the lore and follow the exact things between the comics of the universe for continuity, because if you do, then you'll just confuse yourself. And he used an argument about an old TV show where like it takes place in this hospital, and throughout the entire series you think it's real, but at the end you find out that it's all a part of the imagination of some kid. And if you look close enough, then a lot of the characters from this show appear in a lot of other shows, thus making them a part of the imagination. And it just keeps on going and going until pretty much our entire reality is a part of this kid's imagination.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I know that one. There's like a website that I found that took the crossovers from all these television
right,
shows.
yeah, exactly,
And said
yeah.
if there's a crossover, then they're inside the same continuity. And he was able to show that the Knight Rider TV series was in the same continuity as Star Trek because one of the I can't remember what was the original Knight Rider or one of the new ones, but one of the Knight Rider episodes referenced a very obscure character from Star Trek who was only mentioned as part of uh, some kind of history of Star Trek. So you can make the argument that it's the exact same characters. So Knight Rider and Star Trek have the same continuity, and then everybody who crossed over with Knight Rider would suddenly have the same continuity. And it gets really weird if you try to actually keep track of that. If you
Yeah.
were a TV writer and you had the same sort of mentality as the mainstream comic writers, you would look to these crossovers and say, well, that means that it's all part of the same continuity. So you need to be able to write all these continuities together now.
And it just becomes a big jumbled mess, and
Yes. Yeah,
yeah.
I think that's really the main problem because while I do like Linkara and his views on comics, there's just the one thing that I can't really back him up on it when he said I don't know if he still holds the position, but it was a while ago. I heard him say that the Spider-Man comics have a completely different set of rules from any of the comics that Mephisto appears in. That is that Mephisto doesn't belong in Spider-Man, but he has to belong in Spider-Man because of the idea that they have a shared world. You can't just discard some of this aspect from this world when you're trying to build a coherent narrative, and you're basically forcing yourself to combine everything together instead of keeping everything apart.
Yeah, and that's just really just frustrating, really. God, I really do know where you're coming from, and I do agree with you. So yeah, uh, when you go to draw the Spot Superdog comics, do you have to force yourself to draw it in that style?
A little bit, because it's different from just like freehanding it and not trying to refine anything. Is because if I do that, it'll still look halfway decent. So I have to force myself to do certain things with the characters so that they look less refined than I would normally draw. Which is usually when they clench a fist, I just draw a circle and then lines for the fingers. Or for the Spot's muscular arms, I basically just make it several bulges in a row. And for most other characters' arms, I just make it noodly.
And do you draw it in this style as a way to mock how some of the professional comics are drawn so poorly?
Actually, I started drawing in this style because it was inspired from another newspaper comic strip called Big Nate.
Mm.
Uh, and at least in the first year, I heard that in the subsequent years they did it less. But in the first year, Nate had his own recurring themes because he was a sixth grader who thought of himself as an artist, and he would draw these comics on line paper. And his like main character was named Dr. Cesspool, and he would do all sorts of things to gross out his family and his teacher and things like that. And that's where I got the idea. I thought, you know what? That's pretty cool. Having a comic inside the comic, you can have the regular comic stuff, but you can have anything, pretty much anything happen in the comic inside the comic. So that just gives it an extra feel of depth. And it also lets me take a break on
Right, yeah.
occasion from doing the art all the time.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I really hope that you don't find this insulting, but uh, I've never heard of the comic you just mentioned, so whenever I read the Spot Superdog comics, the style always reminded me of Captain Underpants.
Yeah, that too. Like I understand that you've never heard of Big Nate because the only way that I heard of him is by randomly picking up a comic collection from somewhere that I don't even remember.
Ah,
I've never seen it in a newspaper. I just know it was a newspaper strip.
all right. Well, that is definitely another comic I would have to check out. So, during the course of this volume, there are a number of uh, a number of arcs that really have nothing to do with each other. Like there's the arc of the haunted house. There's the one with uh, their reappearance of the latest Pridelands novel. A whole bunch of things. Of the arcs that are in this volume, which ones do you consider the most main arcs?
Well, main in what sense?
I'm sorry, main and what?
In what sense?
Just main in what you consider to be the main story. Because because
Well,
because there's a whole bunch of stories going on in Housepets, but which ones do you consider to be the most direct, the most main stories? Or
well, the main story is the one with King because it's the one that has the most continuity between it, and it's been continuing on very a much larger arc than any of the other smaller stories.
When you originally started Housepets, did you have this intention from the very beginning?
Nope. The beginning, I had actually intended to drag out the romance between Grape and Peanut for a lot longer.
Much to everyone's annoyance.
Yeah. Then I decided after a while, well, because the thing with starting this comic, it's always been like a practice in figuring out what sorts of stories I can tell, what stories I like to tell, all that sort of thing. Um, and while I did really like the romance. I like figuring out certain aspects of it that people don't always anticipate. People get really weird about romance.
How do you mean?
Because anytime it was the anytime I've had something like bad happen in one of the romantic arcs from the early comic, people will get extremely angry about it because they just didn't like it. Anytime I have something bad happen to King, and by the end of an arc, uh, there's people mad about it for completely different reasons, but they're it's very hard to explain. It doesn't seem like they're as mad about it.
They're just mad that Grape and Peanut aren't just together yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I'm going to keep going with that because I intentionally left it as not completely finished. So you will know when I decide to go back to that. But in the meantime, I still have a bunch of other angles that I prefer working with.
That, that's fun because I think that with this sort of uh, digression with the story arcs, it gives it a sort of very in-depth world. It gives the sense that there are a lot of other things happening going on more than just with the set of characters. So I think it is a good idea to have the side arc going on, like, I don't know, a whole bunch at a time.
I figured from the beginning that I was going to eventually accrue a whole bunch of characters because the way that the world is set up is I need to be able to explore it from a whole bunch of different angles.
And
And
sorry,
what?
continue.
No, keep going.
Are there certain angles that well, which angles do you really like to enjoy exploring with house pets?
Well, that's kind of hard to explain, is because the basic premise of the story, or of the setting at least, is that it's pretty much like our world, except that pets can walk and talk and they have thumbs. And they're basically like little people. And I like poking at the edges of that. For instance, whenever I insinuate that the world still does work exactly like our world, i.e., people eat animals and animals eat other animals. And that makes a lot of people uncomfortable because it's otherwise an extremely silly comic strip. Like I don't have a problem with that, mostly because it doesn't really it's basically the same sort of thing as a real world. We don't really think about where our food comes from.
We just do it.
Yeah, we just do it. It's just there.
That's actually a very interesting concept because if I recall correctly in the past, the members of the forums have gotten into arguments about why certain things will happen in a house pet, and I think on a few occasions that you have responded yourself as saying it's a comic. It doesn't need to make sense. It's
That's
just
sort of the cop out answer.
oh, okay. But yeah, with the other thing you just said about it, there really is no explanation to it because there's no explanation to it for real life. It's just something that happens naturally because.
Yeah, the thing is, if you dig in too deep, eventually you're going to reach the conclusion of just because. You
Yeah.
can't actually avoid it. Because I mean, why start out with a premise of animals who walk and talk and have thumbs and are basically little people? I mean, I didn't actually create the universe from scratch, as Carl Sagan would have advised. I just started from there.
Yeah, and really, Carl Sagan does have a pretty good point with that. There's really nothing else you can go from there. Uh, Looking through your archive, I've noticed the reoccurrence of in a particular character that you've named Ponbon. What exactly is a Ponbon?
Uh, Ponbon is a character from a completely different story that is a lot more ambitious, and I'm probably going to save until I'm a lot better of a writer, a lot more experienced as a writer at least, because that is uh, my big fantasy epic.
So more epic than Heaven is Other Roko?
Yes, it's probably more traditional.
Ah,
It will have magic and people fighting each other with swords and wars and things like that. Only it will do things the way that I always thought they should happen in fantasy worlds, which is, I think, the reason a lot of people get into creative world building is because like I want to see this instead. Anyway, the character Ponbon is just one of a member of one of the many races that inhabit the world. His race is called a Denru for no reason in particular, but his character pretty much joins and is the cute sidekick character for almost the entire thing.
so the character that steals the show, pretty much.
Yeah.
I see. So essentially, you sort of self-inserted yourself into the comic with the introduction of Ponbon, kind of.
Well, that's only because I use him as my avatar instead of my other avatar.
Your furret?
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, it's so I know most people sort of recognize it as a self-insertion. So in that way, it's not really a self-insertion. It's just sort of a including. It's just sort of a cameo.
Okay, okay, I got you. That makes more sense. Uh, Another thing that I see that sort of reoccurred throughout the history of house pets is that you'll do these one-off strips where you'll have like Grape or Peanut on the couch just doing whatever, and they'll have the TV going on in the background, and the TV will be doing these like or saying these ridiculous things. Are these inspired from things that you've personally seen on TV?
All of them, yes.
Uh, right now I'm looking at the one-off strip in the very beginning on page 4 with Grape, and I think the History Channel is going on in the background.
At the very beginning,
Yeah, page 4.
that's not a History Channel. It says World's Wildest Police Videos.
Oh, okay. It's just that it starts off with Worldwide is Chase. Wait. Oh, okay. No, forgive me. I am confusing that with another one-off where like the secrets of the Da Vinci Code is revealed or something like that.
Yeah,
Okay, so this is like something like reality television, I guess.
World's Wildest Police Videos is its own thing, I think, because the the host for it, I think, who is the host for that? I think it's John Walsh. That sounds correct, but he may be the host of another police television show. Anyway, it's its own thing basically because to in order to fill the entire runtime with dialogue, he pretty much resorts to talking in cliches nonstop throughout the entire show.
I don't watch a lot of police shows like this, but in the few that I have, I do recall that happening.
Yeah, it's sort of different from Cops, which didn't have an overarching narrator. So in
Right.
this show, and there were several sort of spin-off shows like it was just basically it was just basically video camera footage, sort of in the vein of America's Funniest Home Videos, only these were all extremely serious videos. And they'd have the narrator talking on top and commenting on the stuff that you're about to see. Like, there's probably also, I think, World's Most Extreme Videos or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's the title of one of them.
Yeah. I'm. I don't doubt that in the very least.
That they all do the exact same thing is since the purpose is to fill up the runtime with narration. Also on World's Dumbest Criminals, that was another one.
Oh yeah, that's
Uh,
right.
and
Yeah.
and I think a lot of the later When Animals Attack series do
Oh
that too.
yeah. All right, so I finally flipped the right page and I found that one-off strip with the History Channel. Yeah, in the last panel. And later tonight, it's the History Channel's rather old event, The Secrets of the Da Vinci Code. Do you yourself find the History Channel ridiculous nowadays?
Yeah, and it's annoying because I used to really like it. Like, there's this joke image that had the eras of the History Channel. It was called the History Channel, and the second part was the Hitler Channel because they kept rerunning World War II documentaries. And I can't remember what the last one was.
Well,
It was some joke about how they only run nonsense now, usually
I
about aliens.
the aliens guy. I take it that you've heard of the aliens guy meme.
The aliens guy meme, probably.
I'm not saying it's aliens, but it was aliens.
Oh
And
yeah,
yeah, and you got that
I've
guy with the
heard that
weird
one.
face. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
All right, so finally moving away from one-off strips, let's go to the going back to the main arc with King and the sort of block party, I guess you could call it. This is the first time where we finally get to see Taro in her sort of avatar form, or out of her avatar form, rather.
Yeah.
When you first introduced Taro a few years ago, did you know that she would be the avatar for a dragon?
Nope.
What made you decide on a dragon?
Um, I decided if I was going to go the fantasy route with Pete and everything, that I was just going to do whatever I felt like at the time. And in this case, it was a giant Eastern type dragon.
So,
The thing with Taro is, I'm sure everybody knows this by now, but when she was first introduced, and everybody complains that it was a Deus Ex Machina because it was. I was just sick and tired of everybody complaining, and I just wanted to get things over with. And of course, because I did it kind of stupidly, it didn't end things at all, but it just bought me some time.
no, that's a fair enough answer. I personally would definitely take that as answer. That's, I mean, from your perspective, it does make sense.
Yeah.
Another thing I see in this arc is the reappearance of orange juice as an alcoholic drink.
Yeah, that was first done as a one-off joke in the arc where I introduced the wolves. So I just decided to keep running with it.
So, so you really just want an excuse to have King just sort of loose and wild, and orange juice as an alcoholic drink was the answer?
Orange soda,
Oh,
not
orange
orange
soda.
juice.
That's right, orange soda.
Hey, I'm trying to remember exactly how I conceived this arc. I don't remember how I came up with the idea of him getting drunk and then hitting on the dogs, but I'm sure that just sounded funny to me at the time.
Yeah. Well, it does make for a pretty double series of jokes with the orange soda drunkenness. Just sorry, just give me one moment. I was looking at something, I had a question, now I lost it. Oh, that's right. Okay, so I'm sure that the majority, because we just discussed it a few minutes ago, I'm sure the majority of your answers for some of my questions will again go down to just because, but I'm going to ask them because I never know. It might lead to a legitimate answer.
Okay.
Why does Daryl have a shaving kit? Do you know why?
Because I thought up of the shaving joke a very long time. Well, not a very long time. It was just a little bit before I decided to go with the this arc. And then I realized after I was done with it that the wolves wouldn't actually have a shaving kit in their house. That doesn't make any sense. So I decided to point it out. And that's basically why.
So it's pretty much a lampshade hanging TV trope.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotcha. Uh, but one thing that really does interest me a lot is how uh, Keen Milton is so well. It interests me that Keen Milton would be willing to offer a place for King to stay. Like he seems one of those very arrogant billionaires that you would meet that wouldn't really care about anyone. Why did you have Keen Milton take an interest in King like this?
Because Keen is a very odd sort of character. He weighs between arrogant billionaire and wannabe philanthropist is because he has all this. The idea is supposed he has all this guilt about inheriting all this money and not actually being a good person about it. And sometimes his conscience bothers him, and sometimes it doesn't.
And this sort of plays to the same effect in the very next arc where they go to theme park world.
Yeah.
The joke in itself is really interesting because it's so meta. The theme park of the theme park is theme parks. H- Again, how did you come up with this idea? It's so ridiculous and funny. It really is.
I think it started out when I was thinking of summary type arcs to do. I think back to theme parks. One of the parts about theme parks that never really made sense to me is the VR simulation of roller coasters. Is because you're in a theme park, you have roller coasters everywhere. Why would you go to a VR simulation when you could just walk about a minute and stand in line for the actual thing? So,
And that exact thought is addressed in this arc with the VR simulator of a restaurant, I believe.
yeah. Because I thought, well, one of the other things about one of the other things about theme parks is that they are themed for no particular reason other than to give them a kitschy quality. Like, like also you would have like these chain restaurants inside of a theme park, and occasionally I would joke with my brothers about, well, why don't they just match it to the theme park's theme more? Because they have an Asian restaurant inside the Wild West section for no other reason than they needed an Asian restaurant here. They don't even bother to justify it. I think it's more fun if you actually appeal to the ridiculous kitschy quality of a theme park because it's kind of stupid in the first place.
It is. It is pretty ridiculous when you think about it. Yeah.
The sort of the thing about the I'm trying to think when did I first think up of the recursion sort of thing? I don't even remember, but I think the first joke I thought up of was the one between Tiger and Marvin. And I realized that that joke needed a better setup because it was, if I used it as a one-off, it would be way too much recursion at one time. So
Yeah.
I needed that. I needed the introduction to the theme being theme parks. I needed the comic that was right before that between Fido and Sergeant Ralph, where they discuss one layer of the ridiculous recursion so that you could properly get to the weirder recursions.
So it's basically meant to carry the reader's mind along, so that way that they will get the joke, pretty
Yeah.
much. Okay. Uh, and really, I can tell that the really main inspiration for this uh, arc is just a lot of jokes. There's really no story to tell. It's just meant to be funny and take up time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a couple of the arcs. I just, especially like earlier, I should probably get around to doing one of those where I just have a theme for the arc and just do a bunch of one-offs within that theme, which is basically what this one was.
Yeah, yeah. That that it that
Recently, I just did those series of 1 week arcs instead. That's sort of different, but it's similar.
uh you mean the one with you mean the one with Kevin?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I got you. Yeah, I know what you mean. All right, so flipping through here, another Spot Superdog comic. Nothing really to comment on that. This next arc. It I want to say that this is something that is also heavily inspired from real life. The one with uh, Kevin, or not Kevin, Joey's weird friend Lester and his
Yeah.
sort of obsession with Western culture.
Eastern culture.
I'm sorry?
Eastern culture.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Eastern culture. Eastern culture. Do you sometimes behave this exact way, or do you have friends that behave this way?
I don't behave this way. I don't think that Japanese media is really all that superior to American media. It's just that we usually will cherry pick from the selection. We usually just cherry pick the good parts from their media and usually ignore all the bland stuff in between. Lester is sort of based off of a guy in high school I knew who was like that.
Ah,
He wasn't
okay.
as mean about it, was a lot dorkier about it, but I think him being I turned up the arrogance because it's a lot easier to see the ridiculousness of it when he's being so arrogant about something really stupid.
Yeah. I I know some people like that, and it can be rather annoying. So, going forward a bit more, there was a one-off Spot Superdog comic where there were three panels where the people were saying, "Who is John Galt?" And then at the end, John Galt says, "I am." Then it's the end. What's the point of that one-off strip? I really don't get it.
The point was I had made the stupid decision to attempt to read Atlas Shrugged a little bit before that.
Oh, okay.
And that book absolutely infuriated me with the way that it so blatantly uh, it was very blatant in the way that it patted down emotions into these balls that would then be characters. It's like, so in, everybody who supports the author's premise is a good person. Everybody who does not support the author's premise is a bad person. And all these weird reasons in between to justify why these people are good and why these people are bad is basically all the little in between parts of the actual plot. And it's so annoying because I'll have to tell you about it later. Hold on. The main issue with Atlas Shrugged, it would be something like, since the author, one of the author's premises is that all altruism is bad. Therefore, none of the good quote characters are altruistic, and all of the bad characters are in some way altruistic. And in order to make something that sounds inherently good, like altruism, bad, the story conveniently sets up that all attempts to be altruistic come from an either a bad motive or they just fail because of the ridiculous way that they're set up. And every single thing in the book is like this because it is concentrated to convince you of the author's premise by inventing the world so to be so completely in tune with this philosophy that it can't be any other possible way. And that gets frustrating after a while, especially if you're like me and you can think up of rebuttals to almost every single poorly thought out principle. And as it keeps going and going and going, and I only got like halfway through that book. So since I was like right at the end of the Halloween arc, it was time for some one-off strips, and I was absolutely burned out and couldn't think of anything to do.
No, it definitely seemed like you had the arc had taken a toll on you after it was done.
Yeah.
Because it got with that one like 4 panel spread of Max. It's really creepy, and I can imagine how it could have gotten on your nerves illustrating that.
Oh, illustrating that was fun. I like that.
Oh, okay.
But I'm trying to think. I think I was feeling ill after that Halloween.
Ah.
I don't exactly remember, but uh, coming after that, I didn't really start feeling better until I did the following strip, which is the one with the kangaroos. Because I like kangaroos and I think they're fun.
Well, after reading 10,000 Miles Up, I can tell.
Yeah.
So not long after the Halloween arc, sometime in the middle of the winter, you come back to the pridelands with the release of the latest novel. And I take it, and again, there is another character introduced that that we think something like. Well, I'm not going to spoil it. I'm just going to sort of beat around the bush around. I don't because it's a pretty big plot point that I don't want people to be spoiled about.
Okay.
But I take it that with the introduction of this new character, this was not originally planned.
No, this was originally planned.
Oh, it was.
Yeah. I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to end it until I think until a little bit after I'd actually started the arc. But yeah, that was basically the plan, was to have this character fill this role so we could have a sad and then sappy Christmas ending.
Hmm. That's very interesting. Another thing I observe about this arc is in the background of some of the panels, there is the title of like a coffee shop in a bookstore, and it's called A Coffee Shop in a Bookstore. Who'da thunk it?
Yeah, that was from the original Pridelands arc.
Uh,
You can see that in the background on one of the strips there.
so I take it that you find it redundant for coffee shops to for a well specifically since this is inspired from real life, I take it that it's based on your thoughts of a Starbucks inside of a Barnes and Noble.
all all of the major chain bookstores have to have a coffee shop inside of them. So I decided if this bookstore was going to have a coffee shop inside of it, I just name it something that lampshaded that.
Okay, another lampshade hanging in. All right. Okay, so I am going to ask a spoiler question, so I'm going to throw up a warning here. If you don't want to hear it, if you haven't read this arc yet, then mute it. I will let you know when you can unmute it. I'm talking to the readers, the audience, of course. Giving it a second.
How can you tell them to unmute it?
I'm sorry.
How can you tell them when to unmute it if you're talking over audio?
I'm going to throw up some subtitles saying to mute it,
Okay.
and then some subtitles again to unmute it.
Okay.
All right, so why did you decide to have Rez's owner take the credit for the Prideland series?
Because that was the original idea for this arc, was basically that. It was everybody thinks that the writer of Prideland is a human when in fact it is a cat. And that was basically just the premise that I started with. Um, in part because, well, after the arc Oceans 2 in the previous book, there's one with the two relatives of the Miltons breaking into their house and robbing it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I realized that I can't have any human-centric arcs. I can have humans in arcs. I can have humans. I could even have a comic where that just solely focuses around humans. But if I have an extended arc that focuses on humans, it's not really about house pets anymore.
Right.
So I thought if I was going to do an arc where I started doing something more with Pridelands, I would have to have animal characters in it. And I basically thought, well, animals don't normally hold jobs unless they're like very specific sorts of jobs like police enforcement, things like that. So it's sort of that situation where in the past women would use the pen names of men in order to actually get their books sold.
Hmm. Oh, yeah, yeah, that's right. Because, uh, well, I don't mean to make this interview about me, but I took a management course last year, and it, there was a man and woman, well, a married couple who were both sociologists, you could say, and they both did some research. And before the research was completed, the husband passed away, but the wife continued to do the research and compiled it into a book. But the book was credited under the husband's name because it just wasn't logical for the woman to be credited. So that does make sense.
Yeah, that's basically where the core of this art comes from, is sort of the underlying prejudice against animals doing human things like writing books and actually selling them. So the setup here was then for Rez to have an owner who would basically take the public credit for the books, so that Rez could actually have that sort of uh, be able to enjoy the sort of occupation that he prefers, which is writing.
Okay, I see. All right, that's really it for the spoiler question. So now I'm going to send it up for the unmute. All right, so now we're back. Uh, that question has been answered now. Through in this universe of house pets, I noticed that there's sort of a themed collar going on. How Grape has a fish for her symbol on her collar, Peanut has a dog bone. There are two musical cats, Fiddle and Keys, both with respective instruments. And with Rez here, you have a maple leaf. Why a maple leaf?
Well, most of the time when I introduce a new pet, I have to think of the tag that I'm going to have. And that was just the one that popped into my head. It was like, oh, maybe I'll make Res Canadian. Originally, it was colored green, but everybody assumed that was a marijuana leaf, despite the fact that it does not look a thing like a marijuana leaf.
No, it definitely does not look like a marijuana leaf. A marijuana leaf
Oh,
is more pointed upwards with the leaves.
so yeah, so then I changed it back to yellow so it matched his eyes, basically.
Okay. I remember that now. Yes. This had to have been 2 years ago, I think, or a year
Yeah,
ago.
it was about 2 years ago now.
Yeah, 2 years ago. Yeah, I do remember that now. I do remember that it was originally green and then you turned it yellow. I remember that now. Okay. Uh, During the spoiler section of the interview, for those that didn't get to listen, you said how you mentioned animals working jobs, like with the dogs and the police force. Have you considered uh, doing or introducing a seen eye dog?
Yeah, I have toyed with that idea since the beginning, but one of the things with a seeing eye dog is that that sort of character would have a human who is probably just as important. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that means I would have to introduce two characters at the same time. And one of them would be a human who would get a lot more screen time or panel time than most humans have had so far.
Okay, I see.
And so, in doing that, I would basically have to start an arc that centers around these two characters. And so far, I just haven't thought up of anything that would be able to fit two new characters into it very well.
I can imagine that would be very challenging to accomplish, because as you said just a few minutes ago, if you introduce a too human centric arc, then it stops being about house pets. So I can see where you're going with that.
Also, could be a service dog for a disabled person. That would be something completely different.
Or that, yeah, that could work as well. All right. Hmm. So this next arc, well, one of the following arcs is when is snowed in. where like
Yeah.
there's like 5 feet of snow that has fallen overnight. And Peanut goes over to Sabrina's house, and they essentially go to the spirit realm. And Peanut sees Taro's alternate form for the first time. Was there really a specific point that you wanted to get across with this arc?
No, I just remember when I first started the Snowed In arc, I thought, hey, this is a great idea. And about halfway through, I was completely burned out on it. And you'll notice by the end of this book, when it gets to the Not All Dogs arc, I had not completely mastered the art of writing out an arc beforehand.
Mm. Would
So
you?
this was just sort of like interrupting the arc because I just wanted to get onto something else that I could write because I was burned out on doing the snow jokes for what was it? 2 weeks, 3 weeks of snow jokes.
Yeah,
So I just transitioned into another thing I wanted to do.
makes sense. I can see that. Yeah. All right. So and a few well a few arcs later, we sort of go back to the spirit realm with Pete stealing King's life force. It's never really explained why, but something happens and the life force is lost, and it comes down to Earth in the form of a sports watch or a pocket watch or something.
Yeah.
Why did what made you want to go this route with King's life force like this?
Because it was much earlier. Uh, I'd been thinking about the movie All Dogs Go to Heaven. And I realized that was one of my favorite movies because of the way that it treated the seriousness of its subject matter without doing things that are against just being a cartoon, I guess. Um, it's very difficult to articulate everything I like about the movie between the great animation and the theme and the way that the character Charlie is a complete jerk the entire time and he gets to redeem himself by the end. I just like that sort of story arc, and I don't think it's done enough, at least properly and with big cosmic themes behind it.
Mm-hmm. And we'll be touching on this cosmic themes in just a minute here, but there are a few other things that I wanted to ask first. Forgive me, but there's another question I wanted to ask about Spot Superdog. When you do those comics, do you use your own handwriting?
Yeah, it's my own handwriting.
Okay.
It's drawn directly into my tablet.
All right.
And
I wasn't sure if that was.
I intentionally made it messier than it is, but it's still legible.
No, yeah, it's legible enough to tell what's being said.
Yeah.
Uh, and in the last arc, Not All Dogs, near the end, we see a side of Sasha that we've never really seen before. She gets rather angry, I guess you could say. I don't want to say that's the right word, but she seems angry. And and after seeing the way she acts like this, it personally made me very interested in her character. And throughout the course of Housepets, there have been a few arcs where it's sort of focused on Sasha, but not entirely. In the future, do you plan on doing a Sasha-centric arc
Yes.
and
Because
dealing with her
Sasha,
abusive father?
Well, I don't know about that, but Sasha is one of my favorite characters because she's just so unique in her personality compared to most other people. So she definitely deserves her arc. I don't know if I will actually go into her family issues, but it will definitely be some kind of issues that she has.
Well, that would definitely be interesting to go into because after seeing that, I fell in love with Sasha, and I'm really looking forward to learning more about her. And just as a really, to be honest, this is nitpicky. I don't mean to, but I'm honestly very curious. But at one point in this arc, you have Bino and uh, oh God, I can't. Oh, Bino and Fox. You have Bino and Fox talking together, and they're sitting in beanbags. And you actually had to point out that they were sitting in beanbags. Was this because there was an issue in the forums about what they were sitting on?
That's Bino and Fido sitting on bean bags.
Oh, sorry, Bino and Fido. Yeah.
That was actually preemptive when I drew that, and with the knock knock painted over, I just suddenly realized that you cannot tell what it is that they're sitting on. And I had absolutely no idea how anybody was going to interpret that, so I just put the little note there just in case.
Okay. I mean, I personally would have been able to tell that they were sitting on beanbags because they're big round objects and they seem rather cushiony, so obviously beanbags. But I
Yeah.
guess I can understand how some people would misinterpret that.
I didn't know how anybody could have misinterpreted that, but I've been surprised before, so.
Yeah. All right, so these next set of questions are also going to be rather spoilery in terms of the arcs with King, so I'm going to throw up another warning here. You said that you include um, the spiritual realm, and you include a lot of these sort of occult themes like telekinesis. Um, I know there's a proper term for it, but seeing into the future. And I also understand that.
Precognition.
I'm sorry?
Precognition.
Yes, that's it. Precognition, yes. And I understand that you also identify yourself as a Christian. And
Uh,
I don't mean to stir up any controversy or offend you with this question, but these themes seem to go against your beliefs. Why did you decide to include these themes?
because it's not actually particularly against my beliefs. Uh, the thing is, I believe that if these certain specific sorts of things actually exist, then they actually exist, and it's not against the divine will in any sort of sense. If it were like a physical law of the universe, any more than gravity would be against God's will. So when I create a world that has certain aspects to it that actually function in a certain way, it's just part of that world's cosmology and the way that it works.
Fair enough. I was just curious as to your reasoning behind this. Please forgive me if I have upset you.
So that's fine.
All right, so now we're finally unmuted. I just have a few small questions to wrap up the interview. Uh, I'm sure that you must own pets of your own, right?
I have one. His name is Apollo.
And is that a cat or a dog?
He's a dog.
All right, so for some of the animal behaviors that you do jokes about in Housepets, do you sort of base them off of Apollo?
A couple of them I have. It was like later because I only got him, was it 2 years ago? 2.5 years ago, somewhere around then. I can't remember anything in particular I actually based off of him, except for one comic where Pete was yelling outside the window at Taro, despite the fact that he could have just called her.
I was actually just about to ask that if that's where you were inspired from. So, well, I would just answer because uh, when I read that, I realized that if this wasn't taking place in Housepets, he would have been barking to the
Yeah.
to Taro. I guess it kind of makes sense how some of those natural animal instincts would cross over like that.
Yeah, occasionally I am tempted to actually have them act like animals for once, and that will come out.
Oh man. Well, um, and then there's also the recurring joke of Peanut always waking up Grape because cats are always sleeping, always.
Yeah,
Just ridiculous.
my dog sleeps all the time too. It's like cats only sleep like, what is it? Cats sleep 20 hours a day, dogs sleep 16 hours a day. It's not that much of a difference.
No, not really. Uh, there's another recurring gag with Peanut in that he is a fast reader. Are you yourself a fast reader?
Um, sort of. I'm not like blazingly fast. I'm just like faster than most people.
Okay. To sort of continue on with this uh, train of thoughts, there is another one-off strip where Peanut is reading The Hunger Games, and then a squirrel randomly ran into the door or window of the house, and in the web version, the alt text says based on a true story. Were you yourself reading The Hunger Games when that actually happened?
Was I reading The Hunger Games?
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't like that because I was reading The Hunger Games as an audiobook.
Oh, okay.
So I don't. It wasn't exactly like that. I could have easily been in the middle of reading The Hunger Games. It wasn't. It wasn't The Hunger Games at the time. I'd already finished that book. It would have been one of the sequels.
Oh, okay. And did you read through those books rather fast? Well, actually, to be more precise, how long did it take you to read those books?
I'm trying to think. Um, I think the audio versions of those books. I don't even remember how long they were. But it didn't take me that long because it was, even though I didn't really end up liking the end of it, it was still an interesting story most of the way through.
Mm-hmm. Did you see the movie?
Yeah, I saw the movie. I think it was First Date came out. I went out to see it.
And would you say that, well, obviously the book was better than the movie, right?
No, the movie was better. The movie took out all the stuff I found extremely annoying about the book,
Oh, well,
which was mostly Katniss's inner monologue, which was the most annoying whiny monologue I've ever heard from a protagonist in a book. But that's probably because I don't read that much young adult fiction.
right, yeah, and that's really the main turnoff point for young adult is that angsty, whiny monologue.
Yeah, and the since you can't actually do that in a movie. I thought it came across a lot better.
Oh well, yeah, I can, I can imagine.
Except for, of course, for the shaky cam part.
Uh,
I was positive that the only reason I knew what was going on was because I read the book in those sections.
yeah.
Like I could actually see and pick out certain events from each of the action scenes and say, yes, I remember that from the book. So I technically know what's going on, but I wouldn't have been able to unless I'd read it beforehand.
Right. Are there some days you wish, or sometimes you think about the world of house pets actually existing, and you yourself lived in Babylon Gardens?
I don't usually do that, no. I think it'd be kind of weird.
Just having a whole bunch of walking, talking pets referring to you as their father or parents.
Well, see, I wouldn't be able to think of that in terms of real life because if it was real life, it would look a lot different.
Mm. How different?
Well, what do you mean, how different? Real life isn't a cartoon.
Oh, well, okay, yeah, okay, good point. Good point.
Like, one of the things that makes House Pets work is the fact that it's extremely cartoonish.
Yeah,
And that actually makes it more believable that these are characters. And they can be cute and weird and adorable without being. If I was going to draw them in a completely realistic style, it might possibly be a little unsettling, or it might still be cute depending on how exactly the anatomy would work in real life.
yeah. I I think that's really it for the questions. Mr. Griffin, again, thank you so much for coming on to the show. I really appreciate you coming on. I understand that you are working on the sequel to Argo?
Yeah, I have right now. I have three short stories I'm working on, and one of them is a sequel to Argo.
Mind telling us what the other two, or are those being kept secret for now?
Those are secret. The other one is still having his other Roku. You know about that
Oh,
one.
yep.
I'm still in the middle of trying to do that one. And the other one is a story that's based off of my biker gang setting, which is Charlie the hyena and her gang of miscreants. I wrote a short story with them in it.
Now, with
And
Charlie the Hyena, you're talking about that one picture with that one. I think it's the one where Charlie is holding her motorcycle on her back.
no, that's not Charlie.
Oh,
That's
okay.
Marrow.
Okay.
Marrow is part of her gang.
All right. Which one do you think you will get done with first?
I'm not really sure. I was considering recently how I was going to go through and revise all of them. I might end up revising the Charlie story and the sequel to Argo at about the same time. So it sort of depends on if I can get the sequel to Argo to come together faster than it has been.
Can we expect a release before the year is out?
Yeah, or at least one of those.
Well, in that case, I look forward to having you back on the show within the next 3 months.
Okay,
All right, I'll see you then. Thank you so much, Mr. Griffin.
thank you.